Welcome to the new virtual virus world and the new virtual church, I guess, huh?
Right?
So let's just do a little opening kind of a meditation prayer, and we'll get started. Sound good?
Sounds great.
All right, you're the voice of the congregation, okay?
Oh, they're in trouble now.
Yeah, that's for sure, with both of us. All right, so let's just take a moment and recognize that we're here this morning for this next half hour or so to kind of get ourselves focused in the midst of what seems to have turned into a kind of, I don't know, national and global chaos. So just let's focus on coming together and considering some ideas, big ideas, that will affect our behavior, affect our hearts and attitudes. I'm sure that there are people tuned in right now who range from being completely calm and this is no big deal, all the way to the other extreme, which is the world is coming to an end. So let's just acknowledge the different ranges of emotion, thoughts, feelings that we all have, and come together in this spiritual conversation. I opened this morning this prayer meditation by admitting I don't know the answer, but we're going to explore some ideas together around this coronavirus and disease and pandemic and just all this struggle that's going on in the world right now with this issue. So take a breath, let's come together, open your hearts and minds, as I will do the same, and so it is. All right. Shall we begin?
Yes.
All right. So I think the title I sent, I don't know if others got it, but what was it? Spirituality and disease?
Yep, spirituality of disease.
Spirituality and dis-ease. I kind of want to put a dash between the dis and the ease to let you know that I'm not just talking about disease in the sense of biological disease, but dis-ease as a broad category. A lack of ease, a lack of easiness. So spirituality, what does spirituality have to do with dis-ease? Now, if there's a subtitle to what I want to share this morning, it might be, now ready? The coronavirus and the partisan virus. Is there a connection between what's been going on in our socio-political world? And this is a question. I'm certainly not telling you this is the way it is, but is there a connection between the internal partisan virus and the externalization of that virus maybe as something looking like the coronavirus? So first of all, I want to start with the idea that if you look at the world's religions and mythologies, and this struck me a few years ago, every single one of them is filled with the idea of struggle, disease, war, and chaos. You look at Jesus in the ancient, in Jesus' world, he was always struggling with the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the Roman pagans. So there's always a struggle going on. In the New Testament, Paul in 1 Corinthians says that the churches were filled with struggles. And churches, since I've been involved with churches of all kinds over the last few years, churches are always full of struggle. Paul says, one of you follows Apollos, another follows Peter, another follows me. So churches have been filled with dis-ease and struggle. The ancient Greeks, their two greatest books were the Iliad and the Odyssey. And if you know anything about those books, they're books about war, the Trojan War. You look at India, their greatest epics are about war. The Mahabharata, from which the Bhagavad Gita comes. The Bhagavad Gita is a war between the Pandavas and the Kauravas. It's a great civil war. The Ramayana, a great struggle in India, the two greatest texts. You look at the Jews in the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible. The Jews struggling with the Canaanites and the Philistines and the Egyptians, the Babylonians, struggle. Islam, the whole Quran is filled with the infidels versus the true believers. It's a book of struggle. The Babylonians, their ancient scriptures, the stuff that's been dug up archaeologically, half of them are about the wars and the gods fighting in the heavens and the gods fighting with people on the earth. The ancient Egyptians, King Tut's tomb, you go into King Tut's tomb, and the hieroglyphs are all about the young warrior. His bows and arrows are buried with him. The gods have given him great victories. All the pyramids are filled with accounts of struggles between the the good people and the bad people, the struggle in the afterlife with the Apophis, the ancient serpent of disease and chaos. The Sikhs, most people haven't heard a lot about the Sikh religion, but the Sikhs were founded by creating a religion where Hinduism and Islam were combined. And they became the greatest warriors in the world because the Sikhs became the greatest warriors in the world because they were constantly fighting against both Hindus and Muslims who were trying to destroy this aberrant religion. My point, spirituality and disease have always gone together. Those of us in kind of the unity and even Christianity in general sometimes get this idea that, God and spirituality should always be about peace and no problems and conflict, and it should just be, everything should be cool. It's just not the case historically. So the question this morning I'm asking, and we maybe look at it together, is what is that relationship right now between our spirituality and struggle and disease? Any questions from the question askers? Anything?
Not yet.
Not yet. All right. Well, if anybody, do people have an opportunity to type in or contact you guys?
Yes, we have an open chat on YouTube.
Okay. So just to let folks know, if you have a question, type it and we'll get to it. All right. So to start this issue of spirituality and disease, I want to give you my experience recently on Facebook. The other day, a friend on Facebook wrote this question. He said, "Is this whole thing, this coronavirus thing, God's way of putting everyone in a timeout so they can think about what's really important?" So this person suggested that maybe God is somehow behind the coronavirus to put us in a timeout. Now several people responded to that statement. One said, pretty dogmatically, "My belief is that God is well-being and never disease." So there's one reaction. One says God maybe brought this to us, another says God would never bring this to us. A third person said, "I've been entertaining this whole notion of God sending the coronavirus for a reason. I find it a slippery slope because, people are saying things like God sent the tornado to kill the gays, etc., etc." This person said, "It's better for me to frame it this way. We humans have brought this upon ourselves by our unbalanced values and our behaviors." So here you have the whole range of issues on this God, spirituality, and struggle thing. One view, God brought the problem. Two, God would never bring us a problem. Three, we brought the problem. And I suspect that people this morning in listening to this are going to probably fall somewhere in those answers. Another friend wrote and said, "No, Trump and the Republicans caused it." And that brought a whole bunch of amens and others who said, "No, the Democrats caused it." So here's the partisan, and it's been played up more than probably many of us would like it to be. So I shared a parable on Facebook that said something like this. Two men named Matthew and Luke walked into a bar. They had a few drinks. One said, we'll say Matthew, "God sent this pandemic to teach us some lessons." Luke responded, "No way. God would never use such pain or disease to teach lessons." They stood up, ready to have a fist fight. The bartender said, "Whoa, calm down, fellas. How about God sent Matthew this pandemic to teach Matthew a lesson? And God is telling Luke that God is love and hates pain." Matthew said, "That's a contradiction." Luke said, "God can't do two different things at once." The bartender replied, "Okay, sit down, have another drink. Now we can have a theological conversation." So this is kind of what I'm proposing. There's going to be a lot of different opinions, but let's have a conversation. And here it is. Spirituality, religion, and disease have always been associated. Maybe one of the greatest examples of this is in Hinduism. If you're familiar at all with Hinduism, they have over 300 million gods and goddesses, but they have three main gods and goddesses. They have Brahma and Saraswati, husband and wife, who are the creators. They made everything. Second, Shiva and Parvati, husband and wife, who, or rather Vishnu and Lakshmi, who take the things of creation, preserve them, and maintain them. And most of us like that God. The Hindus like that God the most too, because once we get things in order, we like to maintain them, preserve them. But there's a third set of gods, goddess, Shiva and Parvati, and they are the destroyers and recreators. They take the things that have been created and preserved and destroy them so they can be recreated. Now, this is great psychology, because in India they didn't have, what we call modern psychology, but they had a kind of psychology here by saying there's three phases in life. Things are created, things are preserved, and things are destroyed to be recreated. And there's the whole picture. All three are important. Now, what I want to talk about is, at this point, is what I call modern cranial or brain reductionism, which means we don't have room for the gods, really. What we have room for is the human brain. The modern world has reduced reality to human brain cells, germs, viruses, and genes. You listen to the news, that's pretty much all you hear about. Brain, cells, germs, viruses, and genes. In the modern view, all dis-ease is located in matter. Atoms, molecules, chemicals, physical organs. Reality is reduced to measurable, visible data points. Now, the ancients didn't disagree with that notion that the physical world is important, that disease is connected to the physical world, but the ancients had a larger view of reality. When I speak of ancients, I'm talking about all those different texts we looked at a minute ago. The ancient Greeks, Romans, Egyptians, Babylonians, Christians, Jews, Muslims. They had a larger view of reality. For the ancients, now this may be the most important thing. If you've tuned out or maybe thinking about changing the station, this is the most important thing. For the ancients, human and animal brains were not the primary source of disease. Rather, human brains were the mediator or conduits of disease. In other words, for the ancients, the problem did not come out of the brains and the organs and the viruses and the germs. The brains and the organs and the viruses were like cell phones or televisions. They received signals from the divine realm and transmitted them into the physical realm. So the ancients had this notion that the physical world is connected to a larger spiritual realm, and if there's any dis-ease in the physical realm, with the brain, the body, the organs, what we would call coronavirus, it is somehow, and I stress this, somehow connected to an invisible psychological or spiritual realm. So we're not just dealing with a virus and germs or brains and bodies, we're dealing with a bigger world. Any comments, questions?
Not yet, but I'm sure people are thinking.
All right. So in other words, in the ancient view, the brain and the body, the organs, are a conduit. They're transmitting information from an invisible realm. Now that invisible realm has all kinds of information, yin yang. It ranges from shadowy dark information to bright light information. So it's not always, roses and dewdrops coming from this invisible realm. For all of the ancient cultures, that invisible realm had darkness in it as well as light. And they came through the diseases that we have in the physical realm and disease of our organs, etc. But we moderns have reduced disease to strictly the material realm. So our focus is on the virus. It's all about the virus. It's all about washing hands. It's all about keeping clean, keeping your distance, social distancing. Now, I'm suggesting that's not wrong, but it's maybe not enough. So my main point is this. The ancients would have been asking, and again, I'm looking back at these ancient cultures, would have been asking of this coronavirus maybe questions like this. And maybe these are the questions we can ask this morning. What is coronavirus's connection to the invisible realm? Is there one? What's the connection of the coronavirus to this invisible realm? Number two, they might ask, Is there some invisible agency involved? In other words, is there something more going on than just trying to avoid getting this particular strain of virus? Is there something invisible going on? Number 3, and these are all connected, what psychological and spiritual intentions might be coming to us, communicated to us. Now, the Facebook people that I mentioned were all conjecturing and speculating about this. Maybe there's a spiritual message in the coronavirus. And if I were there with you live, we would have a conversation about this. Raise hands, talk about it, because I know there'd be lots of different ideas. But let me say, asking these questions does not denigrate modern progress. I'm happy for germ theory, vaccines, all the modern medical research we've progressed, and that's great. I'm all for the great medical processes. However, just because we have progressed doesn't mean we get rid of all the past ideas that, maybe there's something more to this disease stuff. We can't get caught in so much progress that we can't conserve ancient wisdom. In my worldview, the progressives and the conservatives, politically and spiritually, both have something to add. One says, let's move forward. The other says, let's hold on to the great ideas and traditions that have worked. So it's not either or. And I think a lot of the debates could be settled if people would just sit down and say, you're right. There's some stuff in the past we need to hang on to, and there's some stuff we need to move away from and move into the future. So I think that's an important point. Now, when it comes to the spirituality and disease, Carl Jung, about 50 years ago, had something to say that was really, really important. Quantum physics was on the rise, and quantum physics was saying maybe there's an invisible realm below, modern Newtonian physics that is kind of hard to get hold of. Carl Jung said, well, maybe there is an invisible psychological realm that's more than just brains and pathologies and germs. Maybe there's an invisible psychological realm. Now, here's the controversial quote from Jung on gods and disease. Jung said, the gods have become diseases. Zeus, ancient Greek god, no longer rules Olympus, but rather the chest. That is the physical heart and chest. And Zeus produces curious specimens for the therapist's consulting room. Or maybe Zeus disorders the brains, disorders the brains of politicians and journalists who unwittingly let loose psychic epidemics on the world. Now, this is over 50 years ago, and Jung noted that maybe politicians and journalists unleash psychic epidemics on the world. That is, maybe the gods or the invisible realm somehow uses politicians and the media to unleash epidemics for the soul, causing the soul to slow down and to move into a state of, Shiva consciousness, which is the old way is going to be destroyed, or is going to be the rugs pulled out from under us so we can recreate something new. Now, here's the heart of what I want to suggest this morning in this spirituality disease idea. When I talked about coronavirus and the connection to what I'm calling the partisan virus, the coronavirus is obviously the physical disease. But I'm suggesting that what Jung talked about, a psychological disease that accompanies it, might be the partisan virus, and that somehow they might be connected. The coronavirus has certain symptoms. What are they?
Sore throat.
Sore throat.
Dry cough.
Dry cough.
And the chest heaviness.
And
heaviness, congestion in the chest, fevers.
fever, yeah.
Death by suffocation. So those are the symptoms of the coronavirus. What are some of the symptoms of the partisan virus? Now, I'm going to suggest that maybe there is an invisible realm that's connected to the visible, that the invisible germs have infected the masses psychologically through television, radio, internet, and I'm talking not just recently with this coronavirus, but over the last few years with the hate and the attacks going on in ways that, at least for many of us seem sort of out of control, there's a kind of partisan virus infecting us. I mean, I have done so many classes over the last 2 or 3 years where families literally have stopped talking to each other. People have left churches, in the New Thought churches, because they were conservatives or Republicans and they felt like they were not wanted there any longer. So there has been this sort of infection. Irresponsible, I think, hate-fueled media has done this. I've gotten to the point where I quit watching the news, not because I'm against it, because it's boring. It's like, I don't care what partisan side you're on, that is news channel, both of them just seem to non-stop try to infect the audience with this hatred and this feverish kind of hatred and rage toward the other party. And I think this is what Jung is talking about, politicians and journalists unleashing psychic epidemics on the world. I think there's a psychological correspondence, the feverish sort of psyche. And the quarantine business. As partisans, we've become confined to our own little partisan houses. You know, it's like, I'm in this group, and everybody in the other group is bad or wrong. Now, I want to go to the Gospel of Thomas as it ties into this correspondence between the above and the below, the coronavirus and the partisan virus. Here's what the Gospel of Thomas said over 2,000 years ago, or almost 2,000 years ago. Thomas said, if you bring forth what is inside of you, you will get well. If you do not bring forth what is inside of you, you will be destroyed. Let me read it again. Wow. If you bring forth what is inside of you, this is the psychological or the spiritual virus. If you bring it out into the open, you will get well. If you do not bring it out into the open, talk about it, resolve it, you will be destroyed. And about this, Jung and others have said, what happens is if the psychological viruses don't get addressed, struggled with, brought out in the open, where we can discuss them without denigrating and hating each other, if we keep them inside of us, whichever party, they will turn into external manifestations that force us to look at them. In other words, if you don't look at what's in your own consciousness, it will show up in the material world and force you to look at it. So I'm suggesting it may be possible, I don't know if it's true, maybe I'm making this up because I'm an idiot, but it may be true that this 3+ years of this internalized hatred and partisan virus has manifested in a virus that says essentially, you folks aren't looking at it. You're not looking at yourself. We're looking at the others well enough. I mean, it's always pointing at them. They're the ones with the virus. They have the problem. And if we could just get rid of them, all of our problems would go away. But this is suggesting that this psychological virus is in each of us. And unless each of us deals with it, it's going to continue to manifest externally as a physical virus. So for those of us who believe, and I hear this all the time, consciousness is cause, I mean, that's kind of a New Thought mantra. Consciousness is cause. We might do well to see that maybe our consciousness is filled with a partisan virus, and that this quarantine is something that is telling us, you know what you need to do is stay home and engage in some self-reflection. Now, part of that's Netflix binging, I get it, and eating, I guess eating and drinking alcohol has gone through the roof with this quarantine. But part of the purpose might be to get us to look inside, as the Gospel of Thomas says, and bring forth that which is within you in order to not be destroyed. Now, I guess my concern is that it might sound like I'm spiritualizing the situation, but I'm trying. That's not what I'm doing. What I want to do is just ask us about the possibility that the physical stuff going on in the coronavirus might be connected to an internal thing. Now, wrapping up here, the last warning is this. The natural inclination at this point, for me and for many of us, is to succumb yet again to the partisan virus. How do we do this? Fixing. We often nod in agreement and say, yes, this is so true. The coronavirus is related to the partisan virus. And if those others would just get well, we could move on and fix it. No, that's not the solution. You know what we can do about the others? Nothing. I must focus on Michael's own partisan virus. Each of us must focus on our own partisan virus. We must get well by doing self-reflection. So here is the doctor's suggestion. Not take aspirin, that would be alcohol. Maybe you can do that if you want. Number 1, check your fever. Rage. What's your rage level toward the other? Toward the president? Toward the politicians? Toward the Congress? What's the rage level? Now, there's nothing wrong with being angry and making changes politically. I'm not saying, sing kumbaya and let Congress act like idiots. There's a proper amount of anger that needs to be channeled to make things change. But it crosses over into rage and disease at some point, and each of us has to figure that out for ourselves. Number 2, check your sore throat. Vile words and judgments. I have seen people that I've known for years on Facebook say things that I have just seemed out of character to me, and I have done the same. So the sore throat has to do with the idea of the things that we're saying about others that are maybe just a little too attacking. Number 3, check our congestion. Heart, the chest, is it congested? Is it closed? Do I look at that other, that partisan other, and my heart is closed? It's like, they're wrong, they're bad, they're evil, they're Nazis, or whatever they are. What's the congestion of the heart? Number 4, check your suffocation level. The end of the coronavirus, the physical virus, is suffocation and death. And I think there's a lot of us that would rather suffocate in our hatred than breathe in the ideas of others. The last thing I'm going to recommend, and I'm going to be done, where I have seen a doctor out there, a psychological doctor, that is doing this kind of work I'm talking about, is a guy named Jonathan Haidt. I may have even talked to you all over there a few months ago about this guy. His last name is Haidt, H-A-I-D-T. And I'm going to ask you to write that down if you're interested. Jonathan Haidt, H-A-I-D-T. He has a TED Talk on conservatives and progressives. And he gave this several years ago. And to me, he was ahead of his time, because he's suggesting that if we do not cure this partisan virus, we are going to see ourselves get sick in ways to start to show up in the physical world. So Jonathan Haidt is a progressive Democrat psychologist, but he has looked at both the left and the right and says there are certain ideas that are brilliant in both, and until we start opening our hearts and closing our mouths and listening to both sides together, we're going to get sicker and sicker and sicker psychologically, and I'm going to suggest that can show up physically. So that's my 2 cents worth. Take it for what it's worth. Throw it in the trash or think about it, whatever. And with that, I'm done.
Okay, well, we thank you, Michael. We do have a couple of questions for you.
Okay?
Jamie says that this has affected the whole world, not just the United States.
Yes.
How does that work with what you are saying?
Because the same partisanship is going on around the whole world. We don't hear this on the news, but we're seeing it all over Europe right now. Every nation in Europe is having the same struggle we're having in this country between conservative and progressive ideas. The Brexit movement in Britain. We're seeing it in the north, in Denmark and Norway. We're seeing it in all over Europe, literally, in France, in Italy, where the Conservative Party is saying, your progress has taken us too far to one extreme. We need to back off on the progress. In India right now, most don't know this, but in India there's a movement called the Hindutva movement. Look it up, Google it, Wikipedia, Hindutva movement, which is the conservative Hindu party, saying that the progress beyond our Hindu culture and our Hindu values has gone too far. We need to correct by returning to Hindu culture. Same thing we're seeing in America, in Britain, in France. So it's going on around the globe. This is not just an American issue. This partisan, these partisan issues between progressive globalism and retaining national culture is at a boiling point right now worldwide. So it's not just going on in America.
Colin shared a couple of comments. He said, great insights, and he sees you're continuing on a couple of themes he's learned from you already, the connection with something else and the phases of it, including destruction and rebuilding. And he says that this makes, what you're talking about today is making the virus issue more bearable. We will get through this all right, but can we minimize this in our lives, our community life, and in the world's life, or do we even want to try?
Minimize what?
I think he's talking about the effect that this is having on people.
Yes, that is a great question, and it's a question that we're exploring right now. You know, I have some opinions on it, but that's not the important part. The important part for me is that he's asking that question, as are millions, and that's going to give us an opportunity to sit down and learn to listen to each other, because we haven't been doing that. You know, just on the coronavirus itself, apart from the partisan virus, if we can sit down, because on the continuum, the opinions range from it's just a flu and get over it, let's get back, you know, to life as it is, it's just another form of the flu, all the way to the other extreme, which is it's an apocalypse and the world is over as we see it. Most of us fall somewhere in between, but this is part of what we're being forced to do right now, is to see if we can sit down with the virus and have a rational, open-minded conversation with each other to solve this problem. And then maybe we can take the next step and translate that into a political discussion and solve our own national and global problems by having partisan virus conversations. So I'm not giving an answer to that question. I'm just saying I think we're being forced to struggle together with it, with all the different, so many different opinions.
So Michael, I've got a question for you. I don't know if you'll know this or not, but the last time there was a major, I mean, we had the SARS thing, or the H1N1 in 2009, but I've seen a lot of articles referring back to the Spanish flu in 1918.
Yes.
Are you familiar with any similarities between what was going on politically at that time and what we're going through now, or was that one a different spiritual and psychological pandemic?
No, I think it's all interconnected. In 2009, we had a very similar issue with Barack Obama and the left and the right going at it. But, you know, at that point, the left was in power. Now it's switched over, the right is in power. So it's like, now we've got a new version. You go back to the flu and then, was it 1918-ish, that time?
Yes.
The whole world, World War I had just ended in 1918. The world, the Western world at least, and much of the rest of the world as well, Islam had just lost its caliphate in Turkey. The Ottoman Empire had just lost its caliphate. Germany was falling apart. Europe, the world was falling apart. And you had, you know, not long after that, World War II, the Great Depression. So this is not, I mean, this is why the Hindus, with their gods and goddesses of creation, preservation, and destruction, this is a perennial problem. There's always going to be physical manifestations in the form of economic depressions, pandemics, diseases, wars, that show up, I think, to bring human beings back to a kind of set point.
Well, it seems to me that with this situation, for me anyway, it's really made it very clear how connected we really are, how globally this has impacted the entire world. So many people still live in their sometimes ivory towers thinking, oh, I can't be touched, that's way over there, that won't affect me. But
yeah.
this situation has clearly affected everyone.
Oh, there's so much psycho-spiritual soul making going on right now that is just almost mind-blowing. And we've all seen it in our communities, you know, in our own homes. So, on the one hand, I get it. This is a horrible thing, and it terrifies me. On the other hand, I look at it and go, this is the most amazing thing that could happen to us. And I'm not being flip here.
Yeah, no, I agree. And we're getting lots of agreements and a lot of thank yous online. Lethea says, thank you, this is so needed and has been a long time coming.
Okay, good. Well, again, this is not the truth. This is just my thoughts that are bubbling forth right now, and they're for what they're worth. And even in my own mind, sometimes I get done with talk like this and go, whatever.
I'm going to ask the group one more time. Any other questions, people, before we let them off the hook?
Well, Michael, I'd just like to say, while we're waiting to see if there's any other questions, that I appreciate the talk, and it was very enlightening and thought-provoking as usual.
Good. I appreciate you setting this up and making it happen, and I miss you all over there, and hopefully soon we can see each other face to face.
That'd be great.
All right. Blessings. Take care of yourselves.
Thank you, Michael, very much.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.